Hi everyone, today we'll talk about values. We'll learn about what are values, why do we need to learn values before color, the difference between local value, light, and shadow, look at some simple exercises where we can practice values, look at value in composition and it will help us learn a little bit about composition, and then finally we will take a look at a portrait drawing example where we would practice values. So the first thing that we want to do is try and understand what is value. So if we just color pick a certain spot in the painting, we'll see what exactly the color is. And the color, exactly what we call color, is really divided into three different things. The first thing is the value, and the value is really how dark it is. And if we are just looking at grayscale, it would be completely white or completely black, and everything in between is the value. So if we're just looking at this area here, it is just moving up and down. The second thing that a color has is its saturation. And saturation, simply put, is moving it the other way. So it can be grayscale, which the saturation is all the way down, or completely saturated where we can see the entire color. And then the third thing is the hue, and the hue is the slider here, which gives us the different variations and the different colors as we know it, generally speaking. So those three things compile or combine give us the color that we are using. So today we'll just focus on value and understand why value is important. So regardless of the color, we would have different values going up and down the slider. So to give a quick example, we can just draw something here. For example, this green. And if we think about it, on the slider, if we just adjust the value, we can see that the green stays the same. It's just it gets lighter until it gets all the way to very white, or it gets darker to get all the way to black. And then the saturation obviously makes it more saturated. The green pops, and then if we desaturate, it goes all the way to gray. And then the hue changes the color. So you can see it was green, and then as we slide it, it goes to the different colors. So those three combined create the color that we want. But today we're just going to focus on value and understand how knowing this can really improve our art. So why is value important? The reason value is important because it really does give our paintings the 3D shape, and it gives our paintings depth. And if we colored everything in the same value, then our painting would look very flat and we won't be able to present it in the way that we want. So a simple example is a box. So if everything in the box was the same value, we would obviously not see the shape and the form of it. We would just see this weird shape. But if we give our shape values and try and see how it reflects with light and shadow, we obviously would see a more 3D shape, and the form is really presented. So this is why knowing values is important. Of course, this is very simple, but the principle applies for more complex things. So similar to the box, the Asaro head, this is a 3D model of a head that you can find online. Really shows us the different planes of the head and how light and shadow reflects on it. And knowing values and knowing how to present values in your painting will really help you get the shapes and the forms that you want, for example, in the head. You can see the head is a complex form, and on this side it's a more simplified version of it. But you can see how the value is different depending on how light reflects on it. So why learn values first and not jump straight into color? And I want to use the portrait or the face and the skin as an example of why this is important. If we don't understand values well and jump straight into color, we might not have, our painting may not look very good. And the reason for that is color, first of all, color theory is a very complex thing, and it will take us time to understand it and get it done. But also, The skin, for example, has a lot of color variations. And if we're really focused on getting the color variations done, for example, you can see the forehead is more towards the yellow and the cheeks are more towards the orange and the red. I have it here more red. So if we're concerned so much with the color variations, we might ignore the values and we might just skip that, and then the painting would not look as good as we want. And then in more complex lighting scenarios, such as this one, it becomes even more important to know your values, because now the skin or the colors are not the typical colors that we're used to. We have the blue on the one side and the orange on the other side. And here the values become even more important. If we don't have that values correct, then playing around with these lighting scenarios becomes even more and more difficult. So now let's talk about local value versus light and shadow. So I'm sure a lot of us have heard the term local value, but what does that even mean? So local value, it means that some things reflect light more than others, and that's what it gives its value. And that is why some things, obviously, when they are in the same light, they have different colors or different values. So for example, if we're looking at this painting, obviously the hat has some areas that the local color is white, and that's why the value is higher up. When we're drawing the light and shadow that's reflecting off of that part, we need to consider what the local value is. And obviously, if we look at the top part, the hat, the value is a lot darker. So if we look here at the range here, the value is kind of towards the bottom 2/3 of the range. And that's why when we consider the light and shadow for that piece, because the local value itself is lower or darker, then the lights and shadows will obviously be darker as well. Of course, it also depends on how reflective the material is, but keep that in mind so that you understand that not everything will have the same values and the same range of values just because it has the same light. It depends on the material and what the actual local value of the material is. So one of the things that's really nice once you get comfortable a little bit with values is doing thumbnails. So a way of practicing composition is also, for example, picking scenes from movies and really trying to draw them as simple as possible in the values that you think. And you'll be surprised how much you learn and how simple things are in the way that you can draw them with the few values that you have. So when you really zoom in, you'll see that there's not much detail in here. It's just a bunch of values simply put without really much blending. But if you zoom out, you can see that the image still presents itself. Just using the values, you can still understand it. Similarly, in all these other ones, just with a few values and with a few minutes, you can really simplify things and get the feeling of the painting that you want before you get into details. And using values alone will let you know if your composition is going to work. It will let you know if your painting is going to work before even going into color. Of course, color always adds to the painting and makes it more beautiful. But if your values are incorrect and don't translate well, then no matter how good your colors are, your painting will never look as good as it could. And these were some simple exercises that I did, and I really encourage you to try and find some screenshots from some movies because they're really thought out, and the composition in movies is really thought out and well done. So you can just study those using values, and it will also help you understand or get better at composition. Composition, of course, is a completely different topic, and there's a lot more to it than just values, but this exercise will help you get a little bit of an understanding of how composition works. So I did a quick sketch just for a demonstration here to show you how this exercise goes. So the way I recommend is you have your sketch, you change your sketch to the multiply mode, and then the point of the exercise is to try do the whole thing with just three values and just use the hard round brush to just block in some of the values that you see. And then after that, we can add more value and start blending and rendering. So we can choose the midtone. So it can be that. So I recommend removing all controls so that it is hard and there is no opacity control. So three different values. So I chose these three. And then once we have those three, we can start. So the first thing I like to do is just block in the whole painting with the midtone. And we can use the lasso tool to block it in. So that is our midtone. And then we can use the darker tone to just block in some of the areas that we see. And keep in mind, because we're only using three values, it might not look as good as we want it to be, but it really gives us the exercise that we need to see these values. So we can see some of the things that we see, and we can just block these out and then we can refine afterwards. I'm going in, looking at my reference and trying to put in the values that I see. And then once I put the darker color, then I go to the really light one and try and see where is the light, and I can add the light in those areas. And of course, again, because it's just three values, it might be a little bit difficult, and we're just using the hard round brush. And then we can look at the ear, of course, we forgot about that. That's also all in dark over here. The other ear has some variation. Some parts of it is dark, some part of it is mid-tone, and some part of it is very light. So we add that. And you can see these really help you get an understanding of where the light and shadows go, and really simplifies the whole thing. So this is the simple way of doing it. Then what we can do is, if we want to get further into this, we can add even more values. So two ways of doing it. If the values that you chose were too dark already, you can choose a value between these two. So in our case, I think going darker might be too dark. So let's just bring this one down. And then just go somewhere between these two. So this was what we had. So we go a little bit lighter. So we are somewhere between those two. Same thing with the light. We can go even lighter for the highlights. Maybe we can do that. So now we have 5 shades or 5 values. And we can get more into detail using those. So for example, some of these things are not as dark as we thought they are. And you can see, because everything is in multiply, you can see your sketch and it gives you the definition on what you're trying. If you remove the sketch layer, you can still see that the values still give a good presentation or representation of what the painting is. Now that you have this, you can go in The one way to do it is using, using the blending tool. So let's make a copy of this. Using the blending tool, you can just blend some of these edges, for example, based on your reference. So keep looking at your reference and see how the reference looks like, right? Of course, not everything has a soft edge, but it gives you a good start. And then you can go in after you do this and add more details to your painting. Add those sharp edges, for example. And this is just a simple exercise. Of course, you don't have to do your paintings like this using these value studies, but it gives you good practice to understand how values really work. And you can already see just blending those values gave us a little bit of a better painting than what it was. And it's a good start. And then you can just go back, pick a brush. Maybe you can pick something that's a little bit more soft and just go in and add more details. Of course, I'm doing this very quickly. You can spend a lot more time, try and get more detail into it. I also like to just get rid of my sketch layer at the end, but that means I have to really work hard and more to make sure that everything that I do makes sense before I can. So if I remove that, you can see, because we've used the blending tool, we don't have a lot of the details, but the shape and the form is there. And if we just go in and add the details, add those hard edges, we'll be able to get what we need. And I'll demonstrate that here by reducing the opacity of my sketch layer and going in and really painting over everything here. So as you can see, in very few simple steps, with some just putting in some of these blocks of values and then just blending, you can really get your painting started and get the general shape and the general idea of it going. And then you can really spend the time and going in and detailing and finalizing the painting. And keep practicing values and try and understanding as best as you can, because it will really help you understand how light and shadow work and how light reflects on different things. And then adding color afterwards is simple and it's not that difficult. I know this painting right now doesn't look as good as it can be, but I can just spend a little bit of time and just get it to where it needs to, because the basics and the fundamentals of it is there. I hope this video was helpful for you to help you understand how values can be beneficial and how studying values can help you improve. If you find this video helpful, please click the like button, and thanks for watching. See you in the next video.